Hello. So today we're gonna learn a little about chunks. So what are chunks in Reaper? So chunks are where are the information about your project is stored. For example, here I have one project. If I save this project, a really simple project, and I open it, the RPP, and I open it with VS Code or any text editor actually. You can see that all of the information about the project is readable. For example, here is if the item, the configuration of repo editing. Let's see what more. The configuration of the metronome, the tempo envelope. So these are chunks of the project. So this is the chunk of the tempo envelope. Here is the chunk of the first track, which has an FX chain with reaq on it, and you can see, you can see here you have reaq on the first track. You also have one item which is inside this track chunk. So inside this track chunk you will see the item chunk. So you can see here is the project chunk, then inside you have the track chunk, the item chunk, and you have much more things to explore here. Currently using the API we have, if you go to the famous website and search for chunk, you see that we have get item chunk, get envelope chunk, and get track chunks, and set for all of these three things, items, envelopes, and tracks. But we don't have much more things to get and set the chunk than it. There is actually a cool request from Mespotin that I really support, which is to get and set project state chunks. So we could get and set all. There is just one workaround this, which is, let me paste here on the IDE. So here is one way to work around this, like the lack of this API, is using a function here, get project chunk. This basically will save the project in a temporary file, and then we'll read everything in this file, and then we'll delete this file, and we'll return what it read. But it's basically just that workaround to get a project chunk. And to set a project chunk, the only way is to get the chunk, save it in a file with the RPP extension, and then open in Reaper. And then I don't know if you delete this or not. It depends what you want with the script, I think. But these are the two ways I think to get on this and set the project. The problem with the set workaround is that you always need to open from the start the project. And when you are setting, for example, track chunks, I think you don't need to open all of your VSTs and your plugins again. It will sometimes just change what you need to change. For example, if you just change it, the position of one item, it wouldn't like reload all of your plugins, so it would be much faster this way. So okay, so these are chunks, are the information that is storing things about your project. So when we use API chunks, we will use these functions when there is a lack of some API to change something on a track. This is especially true when a thing just came to Reaper. Sometimes there isn't some API to properly change this, and what we do is change the chunk itself. Or sometimes manipulating chunks are faster than manipulating many API calls. And the third thing that can happen is that you are storing and restoring everything on a track, on an item. And then besides being much faster to do this with chunks, it's also a little more safer because you are getting everything in a text. There is everything that you need to get and set. And many scripts for track snapshots and for saving information about your track, they do actually using this. It saves the snapshots from a track. By that it saves the chunk, the text chunk, and then it will restore later if you need. For example, this is chunk 1, and then if you change this, chunk 2, so it is now switching between these two, and the difference is just the text that it is loading to the track. So many scripts work with chunks. But you must be aware when using chunks that Reaper can update the structure of chunks, and that might break your script. So it's really important first to check that you are really understanding the structure of the chunk that you are manipulating, and also be aware that in the future you might need to make some adjustments to some Reaper update. So if you have an API to set the thing that you want, use this API. And because it will be future maintained by the developers of Reaper. And setting the chunk, you are more on your own. Although you are more free, you don't know if the structure will change later. So you must be aware of that. Okay, now let's try to make some examples to use chunks. We will start with just printing everything on a chunk. So here we have our print function, our famous one. And now let's get our another famous function that we have, which is enumerate selected items. So here it is. So is our iteration function. So now let's do for item in enum selected items, and we say which project, do and project local proj equals to 0. We say proj do. Okay, and here we're gonna get the item and print it. Sorry, get the item chunk. So the function that we use for this is get item state chunk. Get item state chunk. First thing it wants is the item. The second thing it wants is a string. But what are you going to feed if you are getting the item? For now, just feed nothing. I think this is the return value, but it won't change anything for now for us. And boolean is undo. I think I don't really remember what this is undo do. I think it creates some undo point, but I'm not really sure. I will just put false because we just want to get this the chunk. Okay, so this should return two values, which are retval. So if a boolean, if it worked, and the chunk as a string. So let's print chunk. Oops. Now we will select my item and save it. And as you can see, here is our chunk. Okay, there is a really good script that you can use to see chunks better than printing, which is chunk editor from Amalgama. I think Xrame and Saxon also have their chunk editor. I don't know if it's available on the Reapack, probably. But I use from Amalgama, which is on the Reapack, and you can set if you are getting from a track, from an item, from an envelope. So I'm setting to item, get chunk. And what is really great is that you can change here the things on this chunk. For example, position I want at 1 second, and then I can set the chunk. And you could make all of your edits here and never touch Reaper UI again, which would be kinda silly but funny. Okay, and you can see things and you can. This is really good for exploring things, like what this first number do. Then you set to a different thing, and you start to learn what each thing do. If you are curious to know what each function, if there is already a documentation, there is some, which is a little outdated of Reaper 7 updates, but I think people are updating it, so give a look if it is already updated or not. But if not, try to update it if you have some time. So if you go here to the RIA team GitHub inside docs and see for state chunk definitions, you have the track chunk, and that inside will have the item chunk and the envelope chunk, and it is documenting each line, what it has and what are each value. So this is a really good site to have in your favorites and look for when exploring chunks. Okay, now that we had our script to print everything, now let's just make a small example to get each line of the chunk separated by line. Okay, so this is more a Lua thing and manipulating strings than Reaper API, but it's really simple. We use the function gmatch to get all of the matches inside a string, and it is an iteration function. So we use it, for example, for substring in, and then we can say do this like this, string dot gmatch, and then we say which string it is, for example chunk, and then we say the pattern, and we could say, for example, dot less /n do n. Okay, so what is this pattern that I'm putting here? So the pattern that it wants as the second argument is what will it print. The first thing I am putting is some parentheses. So I am saying, okay, I just want to get from chunk things that are inside these parentheses. It is a capture. And so this new line here won't be part of this substring that it is returning. So it will be just returning everything inside these parentheses. And what is inside these parentheses is a dot and a less sign, subtract sign. So the dot basically means, here's the dot, and it basically means all characters, okay? And the less comment means also 0 or more repetitions. So we want 0 or more repetitions of any character, and that ends on a new line. Okay, so if you see, for example, in a chunk, it is any character, any character, any character, any character, any character, and here it's ending in a new line that goes here, any character, any character, any character, etc. So what this dot unless is doing is basically returning this, and the /n is this part of the end of each line. Okay, so this is the pattern that it's trying to find, and this basically is get every line. Okay, so it is getting everything, the smallest thing that it can find until the next new line, and it will return as the substring. So if you print the substring, it will basically print out all of the chunk, because it is getting each line of the substring. Okay, but you could print also before it print line number and say local line number equals to 1, and then say line number equals to line number plus 1. And if you clear first the console and print it, you can see here it is printing first line, second line, third line, fourth line, fifth line. Okay, this is just a really basic example of how to do some basic manipulation of strings. All of these strings dot functions, you could also pass this as the string that you want, and 2 dots, and then the function, and then you don't feed the string again. It will do the exactly same thing, and this is much more common to see than string dot and the thing that you want. But it's just a shortcut. Okay, so this is just a basic example to how to print every line of your chunk. Now let's try to do something a little more productive in a way, which is to create a copy of an item. Remember on our first classes that we made a script copy everything to make random copies of all selected items. So we are going to remake it a little, because what that script did was actually copying the script, the item with the copy function, the copy action, and paste with the copy action. And now we are going to create our own paste function, our own copy function. And this technique of copy function were debated here on the copy and paste Reascript functions. It's basically a fork that I do from this code from Amalgama. I do some things different from him. Okay, so first I will explain Amalgama's function to copy the item. And then I will show my function, which is a little bigger and have some differences. But okay, let's start with Amalgama's function. So I will just copy this, then go here to our IDE and paste with the other functions. And here we have our variable like project. And down here I have a basic or a small loop, just to make a table with all selected items. So it is just putting all selected items in a table, and now I will use Amalgama's function to copy the items. So this will copy. Let's make first a loop for for k and item in I pairs, and then we say copy items do end, and we gonna copy each of these items here to the start of the project. So first thing it wants is the item, so item. Second thing is the track, so we're gonna get the same track that is the item. So we're gonna search which track it is. So get item, get media item track. I think it's this one. So this receives an item and returns his track, and then we can say to copy to the same track. And last thing is the position. I will pass 0 and now create some item here and save this, and as you can see it created another item here. And if we go to if we go to the chunk editor, we can see both chunks, and we see that some things are different. For example, the position, of course, is different, and very importantly, it is different the identification keys. For example, IGID and GID, pull events, all items, unless for something specific like pull event, like pull events are items like this that you have the same thing in both items. They should have unique GIDs, these identifications, unless for things especially like pull events where they get the same GID, same identification. As you can see, with these two items, they are all different. So let me erase everything. So in the how Amalgama do that in his function, let's go to the ID. Where is it? Here. So the first, let's read a little of this function. So the first thing it gets is the chunk of the item it is copying, and then it is searching this chunk for this pattern. So these curvy brackets are not special characters, they really mean curvy brackets. And if you want to see more about patterns, besides the Lua manual that I already showed, you can search for Lua patterns viewer and Lua patterns. You can search for Lua patterns viewers. So this website is really great. So you can search for things like this, and then you can see what this pattern means. So curvy brackets means match curvy brackets literally, and dot less means matches any character, and with less is lazy 0 or more. So the smallest string of any character it can find that ends on a curvy bracket. So this website is really great to learn about patterns. So this is what Amalgama is doing in his function. Is searching for every curvy brackets that are around any some string of characters, and it is replacing it. So this git sub function is for replacing things on a string. So it is replacing everything with curvy brackets by nothing, and it writes a commentary that Reapers auto-generates all gits. Okay, so this will return a chunk with all these curvy brackets erased. So basically this function is doing this. And then it will create a new media item on the track that is specified here. For some reason it is preventing UI refresh. We don't need this here because the user can set a bigger scope to prevent the UI to refresh. And so new item. So after creating a new item, it is setting the state chunk to the item. So get the new item here and setting the chunk that is already modified to have no identifiers. And setting the position because the chunk had a different position. So it's set in the original specified here. And this is basically the amalgamas function. I have some criticism for this function. My biggest criticism is actually this line here, modifying the chunk, and especially because it is erasing everything between curly brackets. For example, if you had an item named curly brackets, hello, my name is Daniel, and curly brackets, and apply. And now if I try to copy it with this function, the new item will have no name. And it would work different if it didn't have these curly brackets. So now it is copying with the name. So you might think, okay, but this is not important. The user probably won't put curly brackets. But if he is putting, you are erasing information from the user, which is really bad. And much worse than that, you might be copying items with X states, and it's really common in X states to have serialized tables, and in some cases it will use curly brackets. Okay, so we shouldn't be using, at least I don't think this is a really good line of code, because it is erasing and it's a dangerous line to be run. So how can we fix it? I did my in that thread. If you go to the commentary 26, I did one way where, and I will explain it now. So let me copy everything and just paste here. Okay. So first thing that you might be a little confused here is what are all these comments. So this is Emi Lua annotation, which is a derivative of Lua docs, and is how I documented my functions. It works really great on VS Code, where I can hover my mouse over some functions and it will show me, for example, that this new git is an optional argument, and it will show what type of thing it should be. And you can look more about ME annotations at this site, emilua.github.io, and is the how I documented my functions. Okay, so okay, let's see how I reset the chunks of the items. So the first thing that we must get out of the way is that line of amalgama that erasing everything here on iGit will generate a new git. Actually, if I try to set it now and get again, you can see it's the same. It's really the same git identifier, so it don't change anything erasing the git. What it will change is if it didn't had a git on the first place. Okay, so this will only work by creating a new line. A new item. Okay, let's see how I do the reset chunk identifier. So here is the copy media item to track. That is the function I use, and inside it I will call many times the reset chunk identifier to reset all of the identifiers inside an item. So let's first start reading reset chunk identifier. First thing it wants is the chunk and the key it wants to change. So the key is basically the name, for example, of any of these parameters here. So for example, track ID here on a track. Okay, let me get back to item, get the chunk. So I git and pull events. And you can see I notated all that I could identify, all identifiers that I could find here on the key identifier comment, and here you put the key, and the next thing is the new GUID that you will put. So the default value, this is an optional argument. The default value is Reaper generate a GUID with a function. You can pass as amalgama pass just a blank string, and what we'll do is the GUID will actually be the current GUID, and if there is no current GUID for that identifier, it will generate a new one. So this will basically work in a loop. So for if you pass, for example, GUID here, it would run for every GUID line. So in this item, for example, there is 2, and you need to do this in a loop because you need to generate a new GUID for every match. Okay, you can't do this just one time and pass the same identifier for both. It's not a good thing to do. Okay, so the pattern is trying to match is a new line, the key that we fitted the function, for example GUID, then some amount of spaces in your current state. Chunks have just one space, just trying to make it, in some cases, in case Reaper changed chunks format, like put more spaces, but currently it could be just one space here. But I doubt that they will change this. And then something starts with a curly bracket and the smallest string of characters ending with a curly brackets and then a new line. Okay, I think all of these could be just a small string of characters. Yeah, probably this would work as well. But for now I would leave as this, but if I think the other way is better, I will just update in the commentary of this video. Okay, so in this loop is getting every this iteration function is returning the substring, so this line here and then this line here. Okay, and so sub is this, and what we want is use gsub function to change the identifier. So we're gonna change this line for a new line, which I'm defining here, GUID line. So new line, the key, one space, which is the current default, and then the GUID that the user feed the function, or if nothing, it will generate a new GUID and put a new line at the end. And it is actually a must that you must literalize this function. What is literalize? So basically, we can't just put the substring here to be substituted because this pattern will have some characters. For example, if I copy this line, we can see, where is it? We can see here in the Lua patterns that it started, our pattern started with this, so this pattern, and then because of this slash, it is trying to get the character 2 0 or more times. But we don't want this. We want the character 2, then we want slash. So we need to escape all of these slashes. So this is how we need to search for our pattern. So this is basically what a literalize function is doing, putting a lot of percentages, characters to escape things. Okay, so basically is this line here making it escape all of the magic characters, and then it will substitute this line with the new line. Okay, so this is basically the reset chunk identifier that will return the chunk with the new chunk with the new identifiers. So the copy MIDI item to track that I made it started really similar to Amalgama, get the chunk of an item, then reset the git, reset the igit. I am putting blank git because this will work with creating new items, so I don't need to run this function every time, which is not a problem too. We could also do this way if you want, but I'm doing just like Amalgama. And I also have here an optional argument, pulled copy. So if the user wants to make a pulled copy, it won't change the pull events identifier. So for example, if I do a pulled copy here, you can see that these two items have the same pulled events. As you can see, it don't change. Everything else change, but not the pulled events. Okay, so it's changing all of the needed identifiers, and then adding the item to the track, just like Amalgama, setting the new chunk, setting the position. And here I also have an optional argument if the item will be selected or not. If new, it will stay as it were. So if it were selected, it will be selected. But if you put true, it will always will be selected. And if you put false, it will always won't be selected. So this is just changing the selected, value of the item. Okay, so this is a basic example of how to use the copy MIDI item to track. So get the project, get the items on a table, then iterate this table, get the track of each item, and copy the item. Let's copy it to the start of the project, and I am copying with the selected off, so all our new items won't be selected. So if I create a new item and I run this, I can create more items. It is copying everything to the start of the project. So this is basically a really small example of how to use chunks for copying and pasting items.